Hello everybody, welcome back. If you follow me on Snapchat, same name, you saw what I was up to for the last 5 or 6 hours getting my infusion of medicine for my chronic disease. No, it's not being an asshole, that's a whole different blessing. So anyway, here's a lesson in war real quick. And that's a title I gave it. The essay was written by my friend Adrian Wylie. And because news cycle is showing that the Syrian regime has contained, I'm looking for a C word there and I'm losing it, has gained control of Aleppo again, driving out rebels and driving out freedom fighters and driving out other people. Those scare quotes are mine. I'm going to read a good essay to you from former Florida party, I'm losing words here, probably the drugs I got today. I'm going to read to you an essay from former Libertarian Party of Florida chairman and Libertarian gubernatorial candidate Adrian Wylie, and my friend. That kind of puts things into perspective. Okay, you pardon me, I'm going to be looking at this essay here. I could do it this way, but you never look down at a camera because it gives you double chins. Anyway, so here it is. Hashtag Aleppo, right? Confused by what's happening in Aleppo and Syria in general? Here's a simple synopsis. Syrian President Assad's forces have driven both the Syrian rebels and ISIS out of Aleppo, with assistance from Russia. People there are celebrating in the streets, and the U.S. State Department is calling it a horrible tragedy. Most of the people in Aleppo probably don't care about the ideology. They're just glad the fighting has ended. Both the U.S.-backed rebels and ISIS are withdrawing to Palmyra and Iraq. Off script for a second, my words here. I want you to take note of that. Even the news cycles are saying the U.S.-backed forces and ISIS are withdrawing. The U.S.-backed forces in cohesion with ISIS. You know, the people who are supposed to be our enemy worldwide or whatever the script is, except for when we need them to topple other regimes so we can set up a Federal Reserve Bank like we have in the other Middle East regimes that we toppled, and the biggest political funder in the world and owner of the world, the Rothschilds, can set up a new bank in their country too. My words. But just what you need to take from the essay, U.S.-backed forces and ISIS in collusion have been kicked out of Aleppo. Yeah, we work with them when it's beneficial to us. So why is the U.S. State Department upset that ISIL has been driven out of Aleppo and the fighting there has ended? Because they are backing the other side in this war. When you hear, quote, U.S.-backed Syrian rebels in the media, they're generally talking about any group who oppose Assad. The major players opposing Assad include Free Syrian Army, Syrian Democratic Forces, al-Nusra, which is formerly al-Qaeda, and ISIS/ISIL. The U.S. government has supplied at least 2,000 tons of weapons and ammunition to the FSA, the SDF, previously mentioned, in the past 2 years. And at least that's how much we know about. Sometimes the, quote, U.S.-backed rebels also includes factions of ISIS if Senator John McCain is to be believed. He has spoken quite a few times on backing certain sections that are actually part of ISIS, so backing them directly. That's right, the U.S. government, back on script, that's right, the U.S. government seems to be totally okay with ISIS and al-Qaeda as long as they're fighting against Assad. It's the whole, quote, enemy of my enemy, and, quote, foreign policy rearing its ugly head again. Alliances between the various anti-Assad groups are constantly being formed and broken. Fighting between the groups is common. Currently, ISIL is sometimes cooperating with FSA and sometimes fighting them, depending on the situation. You know how sometimes Oceania was fighting Eurasia, and sometimes Oceania and Eurasia were friends. Have you read 1984? Because it was really supposed to be titled 1948, because it's always been happening. Depending on the situation. The only common thread, back on script, the only common thread is that all of them are fighting Assad. So obviously, with all the inter-alliances between the various factions, many of the U.S. supplied weapons and end up in the hands of ISIS, either through conquest or occasional cooperation with other groups. That means the U.S. is supplying arms to everyone who opposes Assad, including some of our mortal enemies. And yes, both the Pentagon and the CIA are fully aware that these weapons are making their way to ISIS and to al-Qaeda. It's part of their game plan in Syria. Just like in the good old days of the Cold War, Russia is our real enemies and is our real nemesis in this fight. Russia backs Assad completely and will defend him against all comers. The primary U.S. mission is to topple Assad, and they don't care who fills the vacuum. That's why the U.S. government isn't too concerned about helping al-Qaeda, and ISIL as long as it helps them achieve the primary objective of taking down Assad. We're repeating the exact same mistakes we made when the U.S. government gave weapons to the Mujahideen. I had to make sure I could pronounce that correctly. I know the words, I haven't ever seen it. The weapons to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight the Russians in the 1980s. As you know, the CIA's middleman for supplying weapons to the Mujahideen was a guy named Osama bin Laden. We all know how well that turned out for us. But because of the bizarre and nearly incomprehensible bedfellows in the Syrian war, occasionally Russia and the U.S. share common allies. The SDF is one group that is supported by both the U.S. and Russia. The SDF seems to hate ISIL a little more than they hate Assad, which is probably why the Russians help them. But the Russians bombed the FSA because the FSA seems to hate Assad more than ISIS. Confused? You should be. And all of you people who laughed at Gary Johnson for going, "What is Aleppo?" He knew what the hell Aleppo was. He meant put your question in context. The more you know about this clusterfuck of a war, the less sense it makes. The one thing I know for sure is that there are no good guys and there are no American national interests at stake. Unless you're backed, my words, unless you're backed by the Rothschilds politically and you want to topple another regime and make sure that every country has a nationalized Federal Reserve Bank owned by that family. Don't take my word for that. It's true. But don't take my word for it. Look it up. Facts don't have to be verified by you to be true. The first American soldier was killed in combat last month in Syria. More will follow if we continue on our current course. The United States government needs to immediately end all involvement in this quagmire. Our continued meddling will only lead to more suffering for the innocent people of Syria and more wasted American blood and treasure. End quotes. You got something to say about this broadcast? Hit me up online at ConHippie on Snapchat. At ConHippie on Twitter. Come back at me. That was an essay written by former Florida Libertarian Party head Adrian Wylie, friend of mine, comrade, and I commiserate with every one of those letters and words.